Okay, I think my mic is on now. Well, good morning, everyone. Very pleased to be here. As the moderator mentioned, my name's Jerry Glover. I'm Chief of Staff at the International Rice Research Institute. I grew up on a mixed crop livestock farm in Colorado, the United States. I have a technical background in soil science and farming systems, so I really, as you might imagine, love to talk about agriculture. And so I'm really happy to be here to discuss the rice systems work we're doing at Erie. Before I get started, though, I really do want to thank Professor Yasmin for the kind invitation that brought me here, and the Imranti staff that have supported me very much. It's been a great warm welcome, so I'm very grateful for that. Also, the Malaysian people. It's just been a wonderful visit, short as it is, but the people have been wonderful. And I have to mention the great food. I mean, the food was worth the trip to be here, so yes. And of course, I'm here to talk about the foundation of Malaysian cuisine, rice. I was just reading this morning, it's the third most economically important commodity in Malaysia. And of course, in terms of calorie provision for humans, it's the most important. Before I launch in, though, I want to just say, bottom line up front, as we like to say, I'm going to be covering three areas. It's not just about rice, but it's rice for a reason. One is inclusive livelihoods, ensuring that marginal, poor smallholder farmers get the innovations and information they need. Improve nutrition. It's not just about meeting the caloric energy needs of a growing global population, but nutritional needs as well. And of course, as we're realizing more and more, ensuring a sustainable planet. Got to get my... So just a bit about Erie's history. We just celebrated our 65th anniversary this year. Erie was launched in response to the fear of the growing global population back in the 1950s and 60s that might not have enough to eat. So it was Erie, like other research centers at the time, had a fairly narrow, simple focus, reducing hunger, food security, and poverty. And of course, as the world has changed, that has become more complicated. Back then, really mostly focused on increasing yields per acre, per hectare, to bump up overall production. And as the world has changed, Erie has had to evolve to meet those needs. I should mention, Erie's not doing this alone. As an international research institute, we're part of it's called the CGIAR. It's a network of 15 other international research institutes that cover crop production, livestock, aquaculture, and natural resource management. So we're not working in isolation, we're working with global partners on whole systems. Erie's a fairly large institute with roughly 1,600 staff in 17 countries. And we're very multinational. So as it shows up there, over 40 nationalities are represented by our staff. Over 600 partners worldwide, again, focusing on we're not going it alone. And those partners include public sector partners such as national ag research institutes, civil society, the NGOs that often do the last mile delivery work, but more importantly these days, the private sector, really leveraging the needs and outputs from the private sector to deliver innovations and information in new ways. Now, as I mentioned, when Erie was stood up, it was a fairly simple mandate compared to what we face today. Increase yields, increase overall production. And it's largely been a success story. Increasing yields by threefold, increasing production even more. It's not just from expansion of land area. In fact, most of the increased production is from increased yields per hectare. Over 150 million, primarily smallholder farmers, produce rice that feeds 4 billion people. It's the third most traded commodity globally. And over 100 countries produce rice. So on one side of the rice grain, as we say, there's always two sides of the coin, but in this case, two sides of the rice grain. It's a tremendously impactful and important crop for which supports all these farmers. So that's the productivity side, but there's also the other side of the equation, which is the environmental challenges that crops like rice pose to the environment overall. It's a very thirsty crop, taking up some 30% of the fresh water globally. And although rice occupies 10% of global cropland, it's responsible for roughly 50% of the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, coming off of the global cropland area. And of course, high production requires oftentimes high inputs, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and so on. So one of Erie's, prime mandates is to reduce the negative impacts that we see here from rice production in particular. One thing that we don't show up here, but is also a growing challenge, I'm sure Malaysians are aware of this, is the growing problem with, for example, type 2 diabetes. Rice is strongly connected to that. And I'm saying that here because I want to talk more about that later as we get into the plant breeding. But, again, in terms of nutrition, we need more micronutrients, higher protein, and lower glycemic index in our foods. So the whole grain is trying to, tackling, the full picture, not just leveraging the opportunities for additional increased yields, but to meet the challenges and reduce those environmental impacts and improve nutrition. So again, I come back to those three things I pointed out before. A sustainable planet, reducing the environmental impact. Inclusive livelihoods, making sure that farmers producing the food have a good quality of life, reduce drudgery, lower exposure to harmful pesticides, and of course, adequate access to good nutrition. And improved nutrition for all, including the consumers in the urban areas, even though they're not producing the food. So we developed a new 10-year vision, and so it's that whole grain approach, as I call it. I'm going to be talking about the innovations that Erie is focused on today. Two main tracks. One is the crop improvement, the rice breeding innovations, and the other is more on the systems approach, the not just the agronomy, but also policy, information delivery, and so on. But I think, as will be talked about more later, it's not just about talking about innovations and technologies, but the systems through which they travel to get where they're going. So starting out with the systems work, it's both biophysical and socioeconomic research. Erie is a global leader in low-emission rice research, from market intelligence to land preparation needed before the crops are even planted, better seed selection for better crop yield, and climate-friendly crop management is a real key here. All the way through harvest and post-harvest, we work on those as well. Very important for reducing lost harvest. And then measurement, reporting, and verification tools that help ensure that the greenhouse gas emissions are actually being lowered in the field. I'm going to start out with a very important tool developed by Erie and other centers of the CGIAR system. It's this GlowMip. So growing crops most effectively and at highest productivity requires good market intelligence. Heavy data use in this system, and by the way, you can easily look this up online, just do a Google search for GlowMip. But this is a very powerful tool. It's not intended for farmer use. It's more on policymakers, seed suppliers, scientists, and so on. And then going closer down to the farm level, one thing that Erie has been very advanced on is in the field preparation, including specifically laser land leveling. Here's a picture of a tractor pulling a land leveler, that scraper, and it's using laser-guided information to level the field so that soil water is more evenly distributed. As a result, you get much better stand establishment, much more even application and use of fertilizers and nutrients, much less loss from off the farm field. So reducing methane emissions by quite a bit. This is a very important precursor to using the right seeds and nutrients and so on. Very importantly, it reduces inputs for farmers, so reduces their costs and potentially reduces their exposures to harmful chemicals. So increasing yields, lowering the impact, increasing the overall productivity. Farmers need the right seed for the right time, for the right place. And so this Seedcast is a mobile-based app that Erie developed to help extension agents, farmers, seed dealers, and seed suppliers with the right information to know what seeds to supply and where. We're really trying to get farmers to replace older, less productive varieties with newer ones that perform much better in today's environment. This was launched in India recently, where it's been really taking off. Crop establishment, following on that land level program and approach, direct seeded rice rather than transplanting rice. Directly seeding it, even in irrigated lowland systems, really reduces labor, reduces the disturbance to the soil and in the environment, and requires much less water. Again, that whole package of reducing the environmental impacts. In the lower right corner, you see that drone delivering fertilizer. In these direct seeded systems, you can even use drones quite cost effectively to plant, to fertilize, and to do your sprays. That reduces the drudgery, reduces costs, and is much cheaper than larger scale farm equipment that is hard to get into the field and can be quite disruptive. Now, once the farmer has planted the crop and it's established, there is still need for a lot of information. And it's one thing to develop that information through research, but the real innovations come with how that information can be delivered. Two products here that Erie has worked on one is on providing information on agronomy and best farm practices. For example, how to and when to apply your crop nutrients. This is widely used, and we cover the countries that we work in Asia and in Africa. And then the other is the Rice Crop Manager, more specifically focused on nutrient use and application. But this really brings together, from space to place, using the global, the massive amounts of data that we have now down to the farm level and making that useful and translatable to farmers for their use. And in rice systems, of course, as I mentioned in those earlier slides, water management is really crucial. Lowering the requirement that rice for rice production is really an important part of that whole environmental sustainability piece. It's also critical for the farmer's bottom line. Less water means less irrigation pumping and less cost for other inputs. One approach to reducing that water need without lowering yields is the alternate wetting and drying strategy. And that's where water is only applied really when it's needed, and then the field is let to drain and dry out. This substantially reduces methane emissions from rice, really addressing that greenhouse gas emission issue. But to do that, you really need to know how much water is in the soil and how much is needed. And this Automon has been very important, and it's accessible by farmers down at the field level as well. Now, once the farmer has produced the crop and is preparing to harvest it, this is a moment when there's great risk of loss of the harvest. So you've invested all that money and time and energy into growing the crop, but you need to get it out of the field and store it well. And so there's a lot of benefits to mechanization. And as yields increase, the need for mechanization increases. There's only so much that manual labor can accomplish on a given piece of land without going to mechanization. But as you might imagine, that very large machine is quite expensive. Often service providers provide those services. Individual farmers can't afford to buy that type of equipment. But how do you get it in a timely manner? Well, that's where some of these mobile apps that Erie has worked to develop to schedule service delivery really makes a big difference. That provides farmers with the knowledge of who is available in their area and when can the equipment be delivered. They can also organize with their neighbors and friends to have it done more collectively, saving, again, time and money. Oh, sorry. And then, of course, the post-harvest. A couple of issues here. One is preventing what you've harvested from being lost and through either pest, disease, molding, what have you, spoilage. But the other is managing the rice straw after harvest so that you can get back in and plant again. Often that's seen as a waste product that needs to be burned. And so Erie has been working on various post-harvest storage and drying technologies that better preserve the crop. And then, of course, in the rice straw management, turning that waste product into additional sources of revenue, either converting it to biochar that can be reapplied to the soil. Biochar can serve as a very helpful soil amendment to improve fertilizer and crop nutrient use. And also, the straw can be used for building materials and other products. This helps reduce the burning. Farmers burn that straw off, again, to clear their fields and open it up. And that's a very inexpensive way to get rid of waste. So if, in this case, you can turn waste into an increased revenue stream, then that really reduces pollution. Now, turning to the crop improvement side, which I think in the last 10 years, it's just been phenomenal, the advances made in crop breeding. Not just in understanding the genetics behind improved crops, but making it possible to capture those traits and put them into new varieties so much faster. Erie is a global leader on this front, using some of the most advanced technologies on both the genetic side and the phenotyping side to deliver this. Not just looking at what scientists think they need, but really doing a full product life cycle approach where they're looking at market demand, consumer demand, and of course what farmers need from the very start of the program. Tapping into what is the most diverse gene bank on the planet for rice. So really the fundamental framework here for the improved breeding is this one rice breeding framework, using a series of steps to identify traits that are needed, and introduce those into new varieties, mixing them, stacking them, getting traits not just on disease resistance, heat tolerance, but also on improved nutrition, improved micronutrient content, and higher protein. And here, going back to that improved nutrition focus, Erie has developed varieties of rice with traits for low glycemic indexes, meaning that people consuming this, it doesn't spike their blood sugar levels like traditional rice does. Not only that, but they've combined that with a high protein quality. The protein content achieved in some of these new rice varieties equals that of pulses like chickpeas, lentils, and so on. So it's really groundbreaking work in terms of developing new varieties that can address these incredible challenges nowadays. Going back to tapping into the full gamut of traits that are needed, Erie houses the most diverse bank of rice genes in the world. Over 132,000 varieties. Some don't yield very well at all. They look terrible in the field, but they have specific traits, some of them, that can be transferred into elite lines that yield well, but also capture those desirable traits. Heat stress tolerance, for example, submergence tolerance, other traits that are really needed. And this repository is very important to taking advantage of the modern breeding tools available nowadays. And then native trait deployment, going back to exploiting the full range of traits from wild rice varieties, including perennial rice parents and others. So exploring, identifying, and then translating those traits from this very diverse background into modern elite varieties. Yeah, so that first bullet I think is very important. Allowing the use of valuable genes from low-quality land races. Without bringing in the bad traits of those land races, you can bring in those often lost traits that are needed in the modern world. And with that, I want to say thank you. Thanks for listening. I see I have a few minutes here for questions and answers. Hopefully some have come in online, and I'd be happy to do my best to answer those. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much again, Dr. Glover. And of course, we do have questions from the audience. We have the first one right here. How do we sort the herbicide for direct seeded rice? And the second one, policy on transgenic rice, for instance, glyphosate tolerance variety. So thank you for the question.
Sure. On that first one, actually the direct seeded rice, especially when you combine it with land laser leveling, you can close the canopy much faster and much more uniformly. That really suppresses weed growth. So actually you can reduce herbicide use in some of these direct seeded rice systems. And again, you avoid the soil disturbance that we see in other systems. Of course, we're not talking about necessarily eliminating herbicides, but reducing the reliance on them and increasing the effectiveness of their use. So a big important part of the hazards of chemical use is it goes to waste. It runs off the field into surrounding environments, is not very effective in doing what it needs to do, whether you're talking about weeds or pests. You really want to apply the least amount possible for the most effective result. And these management practices that increase stand establishment, close the crop canopy to help prevent weed growth, that's really essential to improved use of chemical inputs and allows for opportunities to reduce them. Policy on transgenic rice. I come from the US. Most of our commodities are transgenic. We have a very open policy on transgenic use. There's certainly issues around that. Erie currently doesn't have a program on to develop transgenic herbicide-tolerant varieties. They have been working, Erie has been working on what's called golden rice that brings in vitamin A into rice, and that is a transgenic rice, but that has limited opportunity in many of the countries we work. For example, in Africa, it's even more limited. The openness to transgenic is even more limited than here in Asia. I hope that answers the question on that.
Thank you so much. Do we have more? We have, all right, let's go with our second question. What lessons can Malaysia learn and adapt from countries such as Vietnam, India, or regions where IRRI operates, considering the significant impact of climate change?
Yeah, I'll say one thing. Introduce new, improved crop varieties. Ensuring that farmers have access to the best, newest crop varieties is essential. The difference that new crop varieties make in the face of extreme weather events, reduced soil fertility, increased temperatures, especially night temperatures for rice, is remarkable. I mean, we're talking about sometimes doubling or tripling yields through new crop varieties. It's not that easy either, because we can develop a lot of new crop varieties, but getting them into the hands of farmers is critical, and that takes good seed producers, seed suppliers, policies that allow for innovation and openness to new varieties coming in from multiple places. It's a global marketplace when we talk about improved crop varieties. And so I'd say improved crop varieties is the bottom line there. Of course, we have to continue to work on the agronomy. Land degradation and soil fertility issues continue to be a fundamental barrier in most places where we work.
Thank you, Dr. Glover. We're going to have another question from the audience. All right, for the next one, do you believe that cross-marriage among the varieties is a future of breeding rice research and to increase the yield?
Well, it's not just the future of breeding rice, it's also the past. So for millennia, going back to the earliest rice farmers, they were crossing rice varieties, backed in land races, to get better agronomic traits involved. Of course, nowadays we can do it much faster. I didn't emphasize in one slide that it used to take, like in the 1980s, it took over a decade to develop a new variety. Because of the advances in crop breeding, we can now do that in several years. And of course, that does involve crossing different varieties, different parental lines, different populations to get the traits that are needed. So yes, it is very much the future and the past of rice improvement, crop improvement more generally.
Thank you so much. We have our final question right here. All right. Does IRRI have a specially program to produce more breeders globally?
Yeah, right. That's a great question. We put this in the category of capacity building. And as I mentioned, Erie has over 600 partners globally. Many of those include national research programs. We do scientific trades. Scientists come to Erie to train and learn. Also, there's the learning by doing. So Erie working directly with scientists from around the world. Both sides learn more, increase the capacity on breeding. Students, Erie has a learning and education facility with dormitories. So we have young scientists, young aspiring scientists from all over the world come in and stay for short, medium, and long-term postings to do that. So yes, and that's really incredibly important, as many young people have been turned away from agriculture. We really do need to keep that population of young scientists alive and well trained.
All right, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, let's give Dr. Glover a huge round of applause for that insightful and inspiring presentation. And again, Dr. Glover, your work reminds us how innovation in agriculture can create lasting impact for communities and ecosystem alike. And of course, we hope that you'll enjoy some of our Malaysian food that we have here, Doctor. I heard Jalan Alor is quite fantastic at night, yeah? But before we proceed to the next session, Doctor, we would like you to have a very quick photo session with our photographers. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, one more time, let's give Dr. Glover one more round of applause. Thank you so much, Dr. Glover. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we move on, we'll be displaying the QR code that is being displayed on the screen. And again, please take a moment to scan it and share your feedback on this session. And again, your input helps Meranti and iNation continue improving the programs that we create for you.